The alien child stumbled through the dry, cracked landscape of the barren planet. His legs were weak, and his body ached from hunger and thirst. He had been alone for so long. Days blurred into nights, and with each passing hour, he felt more hopeless. His species, once proud and powerful, had disappeared, leaving him as the last of his kind. No one had come for him. No one had come to help. The stars above him seemed distant, uncaring. He was just a forgotten child, abandoned on a dead world. His mind wandered back to the stories he had heard before everything fell apart. His people believed in unity, in helping others across the galaxy. But now his people were gone. There were no other species left to turn to. His parents, his friends, even the leaders of his world, they were all gone. He was alone. Then something strange happened. A soft sound, faint but unmistakable, reached his ears. It was different from the usual winds that swept through the planet. This sound had a rhythm, a purpose. The child's eyes snapped open. Was it another ship? Was it someone else who had finally come to save him? He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his limbs. The alien child's heart raced as he turned toward the sound. In the distance, something was moving. It was big, much bigger than anything he had ever seen. The ground trembled slightly with each step it took, and the child could feel it under his feet. He held his breath, watching, waiting. The object grew closer, and he could finally make out its shape, a ship, but not like any ship he had ever known. It was sleek, its surface reflecting the light of the distant sun. It looked strange, unlike anything his people had ever built. The ship slowed as it neared, settling down gently onto the cracked earth with a soft thud. The child's breath caught in his throat. Was this it? Was someone here to help him? The hatch on the ship opened slowly, and a figure stepped out. The child's eyes widened. The figure was tall, but not as tall as the beings of his own kind. This one had strange skin, pale and smooth, and two eyes that looked down at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. The being was dressed in strange clothing, unlike anything the child had seen before. The child took a step back, unsure of what to do. He had heard stories of humans, fearsome warriors who roamed the galaxy, but they were also known for their unpredictability. Some said they would help anyone in need, while others warned that humans were ruthless conquerors, ready to destroy anyone who stood in their way. The figure didn't move immediately. It just stood there, watching the alien child. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The silence stretched on, and the child's heart pounded in his chest. Was this the moment he had been waiting for? Would this being take him in, or would it turn away like all the others? Then, to the child's surprise, the human spoke. The voice was soft, but firm. It wasn't threatening, just calm and steady. "Hey there," the human said, kneeling down slowly so it wasn't towering over the child. "Are you all right?" The child flinched at the sound of the voice. It was so different from the harsh tones of the warriors he had imagined. This human wasn't shouting at him or demanding something. It was speaking with kindness, as if it cared. "I'm alone," the child said, his voice barely above a whisper. He had never spoken to anyone besides his own kind, and even then, his words felt strange. He swallowed hard, trying to push past the fear. "I don't have anyone. I don't know what to do." The human didn't answer right away. Instead, it reached into a bag at its side and pulled out a small container. The child could smell something delicious coming from it, a scent he hadn't smelled in so long. Food. The human slowly extended the container toward him. The child hesitated, his eyes flicking back to the human's face. There was no trickery in those eyes, no hint of malice. Just calm. Just kindness. The child's stomach growled loudly, making him wince. He hadn't eaten properly in days. He looked back at the human and took a hesitant step forward. Slowly, he reached out, taking the food from the human's hand. It was a simple meal, but to the child, it felt like the most precious thing in the universe. As the child ate, the human didn't speak. It simply watched, waiting patiently. The child finished the food quickly, his hunger overwhelming him. He hadn't realized just how weak he had become until he felt a surge of energy return with every bite. He looked up at the human again, his eyes filled with confusion and wonder. "Why are you helping me?" the child asked, his voice quiet. "Why are you here?" The human sighed and sat down on the ground next to the child. It looked up at the sky for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "We don't leave people behind," the human said softly. "Not if we can help it." The child's mind raced. He didn't understand. All the others had abandoned him. All the others had given up. Why was this human different? The human smiled, as if understanding the confusion in the child's eyes. "I know it's hard to understand," the human continued, "but we're not like the others. We don't leave people behind. Not if they need us." The child didn't know what to say. He had heard stories, legends about the humans, but he never expected them to be true. He had been told they were dangerous, that they would destroy anything in their path. And yet here was this human, offering help, offering hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, the alien child felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone after all. The alien child stood in the middle of a desolate world, surrounded by dust and the remains of a civilization long forgotten. His body was frail, and every step he took seemed harder than the last. The planet was silent, the only sound being the occasional gust of wind that swept across the barren landscape. His eyes, once full of hope and curiosity, were now dull with exhaustion and fear. He remembered the day everything changed. His people, his family, his friends, had all vanished. The planet, once a bustling hub of activity and life, was now empty. His species had once believed in the unity of all life, the importance of helping others in times of need. But now he was the last of his kind, stranded in a place that seemed to care nothing for his existence. No one had come for him. No ship, no rescue, no sign of hope. He had heard stories from the older ones about the galaxy, about distant stars, powerful fleets, and beings that would always come to the aid of those in need. But none of that was true. He had waited, day after day, under the blazing sun and the cold night skies, hoping for someone, anyone, to come. But no one had. He collapsed to his knees, tears threatening to fall from his eyes, though he didn't even have the energy to cry. The stars above him seemed indifferent, watching from a distance. He was alone. There was no one left to turn to. Just as he thought he might give in to despair, a sound broke the silence. It was soft at first, like the hum of distant machinery, but it grew louder with each passing second. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could someone, finally, be coming for him? His breath caught in his throat as he slowly stood up, his body shaking with anticipation. The sound grew louder and louder, and then, through the dust and the haze of the planet's atmosphere, something appeared. It wasn't like any ship he had ever seen before. It was sleek, shining under the dying light of the sun, its smooth surface reflecting the light in strange ways. The child's heart raced. Could this be the salvation he had been waiting for? The ship landed softly, its engines humming as it settled onto the ground. The child took a cautious step forward, his mind racing with uncertainty. Who could it be? What species would be on that ship? His people had been abandoned by everyone. Would this ship do the same? The hatch on the ship opened with a hiss, and a figure stepped out. The child's eyes widened as he watched the being before him. It was a human, a creature he had only heard of in stories. Humans were known throughout the galaxy. The human took a slow step forward, lowering its hands to show the child it meant no harm. "It's okay," the human said gently. "I won't hurt you. We're here to help." Help. The word hung in the air, and for a moment, the child's mind couldn't process it. He had been told so many times that no one would come for him, that he was alone. The galaxy had turned its back on him. So why would this human be different? The human knelt down to the child's level, its face showing no sign of fear, only empathy. "You're not alone anymore," the human continued, its voice soft but firm. "We're here to take you with us. You'll be safe now." The child blinked in confusion. "Safe," he whispered. "But why? Why would you help me?" The human smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Because that's what we do. We help. We don't leave people behind." The child's breath caught in his throat. He had never heard words like that before. It was hard to believe. Could this human really be offering help without asking for anything in return? The human held out a small device, offering it to the child. "Here," the human said. "Take this. It's food. You've been alone for too long. You need to eat." The child's stomach growled at the mention of food, and he instinctively reached out for the device. His hands trembled as he took it, unsure of whether to trust this strange human or not. But the hunger within him was too strong. With a deep breath, he opened the device and tasted the food. It was simple, but it felt like the most precious thing in the universe. As he ate, the child looked up at the human, still unsure but feeling a flicker of hope deep inside. Maybe, just maybe, this human wasn't like the others. Maybe this human would truly help him. The human watched him with gentle eyes, waiting, as if giving the child the time he needed to process what was happening. For the first time in what felt like forever, the child began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. The alien child's hands shook as he finished the last bite of food the human had offered him. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, his stomach was no longer growling, and his body was starting to feel a little stronger. But there was something else, something deep inside him, that felt different. The strange human who had come to him, offering food and comfort, was not like the others who had abandoned him. But could he trust this human? Could he trust anyone? The human didn't rush him. Instead, it stood up slowly, giving the child space to think. The dust from the planet's surface swirled around them in the gentle breeze, but the child hardly noticed. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What was he supposed to do now? He had never been in a situation like this before. His species, his people, had always been the ones helping others, not the ones receiving help. He had been taught to rely on no one but his own kind. Yet here was this human, offering not just food, but something far more valuable: hope. "Are you feeling better?" the human asked gently, its voice cutting through the child's thoughts. The human was now standing at a distance, giving the child the time he needed. The child nodded silently, unsure of what else to say. There was still so much he didn't understand. But one thing was clear: he had to make a choice. The human was offering something that the child had not even dared to imagine for so long: companionship, safety, and a chance to escape this lonely, desolate world. But trust was not something that came easily to the alien child. He had been abandoned before, left to fend for himself on a planet that seemed to care nothing for him. Could he risk trusting again? Could he put his faith in this human? The human seemed to sense his hesitation. It sat down on the ground, its posture open and non-threatening. "You don't have to decide right away," the human said, its voice calm. "I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm just asking you to let me help. You don't have to face this alone." The child looked at the human, trying to read its face. There was something in those eyes, something sincere and kind, that made the child wonder if this human really meant what it said. The alien child's heart thudded in his chest as he fought with the fear and uncertainty gnawing at him. It was hard to remember what it felt like to trust, to believe that someone could help. But this was different. Something in the human's presence made the child feel safe, even if just for a moment. The child closed his eyes for a brief moment and took a deep breath. He couldn't deny the reality anymore. This human had offered him something no one else had: a chance. Chance to escape. A chance to leave this forsaken planet behind. He had nothing left to lose. His people were gone. There was no one else. He had nothing but memories of a past that no longer existed. The only thing that remained was the future, And right now, that future was uncertain. But this human, this stranger, was offering him a path forward. With a hesitant step, the child walked toward the human, his eyes still filled with uncertainty, but also something else, hope. The human smiled as the child approached, not with triumph, but with understanding, as if it knew how difficult this decision was. The alien child stood before the human, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the child looked up at the human, his voice barely a whisper. I will come with you." The human's smile grew wider, but it didn't say anything right away. Instead, it simply nodded. "I'm glad you're coming," the human said softly. "We'll get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can heal, and we'll figure out what comes next. Together." Together. The word seemed foreign to the child, but it felt good. For the first time in so long, he wasn't alone. The fear that had plagued him for so long began to lift, and a small spark of relief flickered in his chest. Maybe this human was right. Maybe he wasn't alone anymore. The human extended a hand toward the child, offering help in a way the child had never imagined possible. Without thinking, the child reached out and took the human's hand. The grip was firm but gentle, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the child felt a glimmer of safety. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he wasn't facing it alone. The human turned toward the ship and motioned for the child to follow. The child hesitated for just a moment longer, but then, with a deep breath, he took a step forward. The ship, once an unknown, now seemed like a place of hope, a place of answers, and most importantly, a place where he wouldn't be abandoned again. As they reached the ship, the child could feel the weight of the decision he had just made. He was leaving behind the only world he had known, the only life he had ever lived. But he was also stepping into something new, something that could change everything. The galaxy was vast, and the unknowns stretched out before him. But in that moment, with the human's hand still holding his, the child didn't feel so alone anymore. Inside the ship, the human led the way, guiding the child to a seat and offering him some comfort. The child sat down, still unsure of what came next, but one thing was certain: he had made the right choice. The journey ahead would be long, and the road would be difficult, but for the first time, the child felt a sense of belonging. There was no going back now. He had taken the first step toward a new life, and for the first time in so long, he wasn't afraid. The hum of the ship's engines filled the quiet as the alien child sat in his seat, his eyes fixed on the view outside. The once desolate planet that had been his prison was now a distant speck in the window. As the ship pulled away, a strange feeling settled in his chest. It wasn't fear or anxiety. No, it was something else. It was the weight of a new beginning. For the first time in so long, he felt something he hadn't known he could feel: hope. The human sat across from him, quietly watching him as they traveled further into the galaxy. The child didn't know what to say. Words felt foreign to him now. He had been alone for so long, locked away in his own thoughts, that speaking to another seemed almost impossible. Still, he couldn't help but glance at the human every now and then. There was something comforting about the presence of this stranger, something that told him he was no longer alone in the vastness of space. The human noticed the child's gaze and gave him a small, reassuring smile. "You're safe here," the human said, its voice soft but full of sincerity. "We'll be out of the danger zone soon. You don't have to worry anymore." The alien child nodded slowly, though his mind was far from calm. He had seen so much in the short time he had been alive: war, destruction, abandonment. His species had always been peaceful, but the galaxy had turned its back on them. The child had learned the hard way that not all beings could be trusted, that survival often came at a cost. And yet here he was, sitting in a ship with a human who had offered him help without expecting anything in return. The ship's smooth journey through space was a stark contrast to the rough, harsh conditions of the planet he had just left behind. The child could feel the difference in the air: the comfort of being inside the ship, away from the deadly elements outside. But there was still a part of him that clung to the fear he had lived with for so long. He had never trusted anyone before, and now, for the first time, he was trusting this human. He had no idea what would happen next. As the ship flew deeper into space, the child's mind wandered to the stories he had heard about humans. Some said they were fierce warriors. Others claimed they were explorers who had a deep sense of curiosity about the universe. But no one had ever mentioned humans being kind. The child had never imagined that one of them would offer him a chance when no one else would. Was this kindness real? Or was it just another illusion? "Why are you helping me?" the child asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The human looked at him, as if considering the question. It didn't seem angry or confused by the question. Instead, it simply shrugged. "I guess because we don't leave people behind. We all need help sometimes, even the strong ones. And you deserve to have a chance." The child absorbed the words carefully. "I don't understand. Why me? I'm just an alien, a weak one." The human's eyes softened. "No one is weak. Sometimes we just need someone to give us a hand. You're not alone anymore." The words seemed to sink deep into the child's heart. He had always thought of himself as weak because he had been left behind. He had always felt that being alone meant being unimportant. But this human was telling him that he wasn't weak, that he mattered. It was a concept the child wasn't sure he could fully understand, but it felt good. It made him want to believe it. The ship continued its journey through space, and time seemed to slow as the child thought about everything that had happened. He had been abandoned by his own kind, cast aside on a dead world with no hope of rescue. But now he had a chance. For the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. The human had given him that. Hours passed, or maybe days. The child couldn't be sure. The stars outside the ship's windows blurred as they traveled through the darkness of space. The child's mind wandered, and he found himself drifting into sleep, comforted by the hum of the engines and the safety of the ship. When he woke, the ship had entered a new star system, one that the child had never seen before. The human stood beside him, looking out at the stars. "We're almost there," the human said, turning to the child with a smile. "I know this has been a lot to take in, but you're safe. We'll figure it all out together." The child didn't speak at first. He was still processing everything. The kindness of the human, the feeling of safety that was slowly taking root inside him. It was a foreign feeling, but it was a welcome one. The child had spent so much of his life fighting to survive that he hadn't known what it was like to be truly safe. As the ship moved closer to its destination, the child could feel a new excitement growing in him. He had never seen the galaxy like this before. There were places, planets, species, so much he had never imagined. The galaxy was vast, and there was so much more out there than he had ever dreamed. The thought of exploring it with the human filled him with a sense of wonder. Maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't over. Maybe this was just the beginning. "Where are we going?" the child asked, his voice full of curiosity. The human smiled again, and the child noticed that there was a warmth in that smile, something that made him feel like everything would be okay. "To a place where you can start over," the human replied. "A place where you can find what you're looking for, and a place where you'll never be alone again." The child stared at the human, trying to understand the depth of what was being said. He didn't have all the answers yet, and there was still so much he didn't know. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. For the first time, he could see a future ahead of him, and he wasn't facing it alone. The ship continued its journey through the stars, and the child could feel hope looming within him. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was also full of possibility. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but for the first time in his life, he was willing to find out. The stars outside the ship shimmered like distant jewels as the child watched in awe. He had never seen space this close, this alive with possibility. Every moment, Every passing star seemed to tell a new story, a story of places and lives he had never known. For the first time, he didn't feel small in the universe. In fact, he felt like he was part of something larger, something that mattered. The ship was nearing its destination, a planet that the human had promised would be a place of safety, a place where the child could find peace and maybe even a new family. But as they approached, the child felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. What if this place didn't live up to the promise? What if it was just like the last place he had been, full of emptiness and uncertainty? The human, sensing the child's hesitation, walked over to him and knelt beside his seat. "It's okay to be nervous," the human said softly. "I know you've been through a lot. But this place is different. Here, you won't be alone anymore." The child looked up at the human, searching its face for any sign of doubt, any hint that it might be lying. But all he saw was sincerity, kindness that shone through even in the dim light of the ship's cabin. The human wasn't just offering words, it was offering a new life, a chance at something better. "Do you promise?" the child asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The human smiled gently and nodded. "I promise. We'll make sure you have everything you need. You're safe with us now. I'll never leave you alone." The child nodded slowly, trying to wrap his mind around the idea of safety, of a place where he could belong. He had spent so long alone, so long being abandoned, that it was hard to believe it was possible to be cared for, to have a place where he mattered. But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like this human truly meant it. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for him yet. As the ship descended into the atmosphere of the new planet, the child could feel the excitement building in his chest. The landscape below was vast and green, with oceans, mountains, and sprawling cities that seemed to be full of life. The child had never seen anything like it. For so long, he had only known barren wastelands, dark skies, and isolation. Now there was color, there was life, and it was all waiting for him. The ship touched down gently on the surface, and the child's heart raced as the hatch opened. He stepped out slowly, his feet touching solid ground for the first time in what felt like forever. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of grass and flowers. It was so different from the dusty, lifeless air he had breathed on his old planet. The warmth of the sun on his skin felt like a promise of something new. The human stood beside him, a reassuring presence. "Welcome home," the human said, its voice filled with warmth. "This is where your new life begins." The child looked around, taking in the beauty of the planet. There were other beings here, too, humans and aliens, all working together in harmony. He had never seen such unity before. It was a world where differences were celebrated, where there was no room for hate or abandonment. The child felt a strange sense of peace wash over him as he realized that this could be his new home, a place where he could finally start over. As they walked toward a nearby building, the child could hear laughter and the sound of children playing. His heart skipped a beat. Children. He had never seen children before, at least not in any real way. The memories of his people were all he had left, and they were no more. But now, here were other children, playing and laughing as if they had nothing to fear. The child couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to live like that, to feel free and unburdened. Inside the building, they were greeted by a group of humans and aliens, all welcoming the child with smiles and open arms. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. The human who had brought him here stood beside him, guiding him through the crowd, and the child felt a sense of belonging he had never felt before. No one here looked at him like he was weak or worthless. They looked at him like he was just another person, another being who deserved love and respect. "This is your new family," the human said, gesturing to the group. "We're all here to help you, to make sure you feel at home. You're not alone anymore." The child's heart swelled with emotion. It was too much to take in, too much to understand all at once. But in that moment, he realized something important. He was no longer the abandoned child left to die on a dead world. He was part of something greater. He was part of a family. And for the first time, the child felt like he had a future. The days that followed were filled with new experiences. The child learned about the world around him, how the humans and aliens worked together to build a society that was peaceful, where no one was left behind. He learned how to live, not just survive. He learned about trust, about friendship, and about hope. Every day, he felt stronger, more confident, and more sure of himself. He no longer felt like an outsider, but like someone who belonged. As the child settled into his new life, he couldn't help but think back on everything that had brought him here. The human who had found him, the kindness it had shown him, the promise it had made. It had all led to this moment. He had been given a chance, a second chance at life, and he would never take it for granted. Looking up at the sky, the child smiled for the first time in a long while. The stars no longer seemed distant or cold. They seemed like a part of him, a part of his new life. The universe, which had once turned its back on him, was now a place full of possibility. And for the first time, the child believed it. He believed that he was worthy of this new beginning. The future the child had now been on the new planet for several weeks. The days blended into each other, each one filled with new lessons, new friends, and new experiences. He had never imagined life could be like this, peaceful, full of promise, and most of all, filled with people who cared about him. But even as he settled into this new life, a part of him still couldn't shake the fear that had followed him for so long. Could he really trust this new life? Could he trust the humans who had taken him in, given him safety, and shown him kindness? One afternoon, as the child was exploring the lush gardens of the settlement, he found himself lost in thought. The soft breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the sun cast long shadows across the ground. He wandered along a quiet path, unsure of what to do next. He had learned so much already about the humans, the planet, and the different species that lived here, but there was still so much he didn't understand. As he walked, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw the human who had first found him, the one who had made all of this possible. The human approached with a smile, but the child noticed a certain seriousness in its eyes. "You've been quiet lately," the human said, coming to a stop beside him. "Is something on your mind?" The child hesitated, his thoughts swirling in confusion. He had never known what it was like to truly trust someone before. He had spent so long being abandoned, left behind by his own kind, that it was hard to believe anyone would truly care for him. He had to know, had to be sure that the safety and kindness offered to him were real, and not just another illusion. I'm afraid," the child admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid this is just a dream. That maybe one day, you'll all leave me, just like the others did." The human looked at him, a flicker of understanding crossing its face. "I can't promise that bad things won't ever happen," the human said, its voice gentle but firm. "Life isn't perfect, and there are always challenges, but I can promise this. You are not alone here, and we will not leave you. Not now, not ever. That's a promise I will keep." The child looked up at the human, his eyes searching for any sign of deceit, but he saw none. What he saw was sincerity, a deep, unwavering promise, and for the first time, he felt a small flicker of something inside him, a sense of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the human meant it. The human took a deep breath and continued. "Trust isn't easy, I know. But trust is something we build, one step at a time. And you've already taken the first step by being here, by opening up to us. That means more than you realize." The child thought about this, turning the words over in his mind. He had spent so long being distrustful, so long keeping others at a distance, that he hadn't known how to let anyone in. But now, as he stood there, in this peaceful garden, with the human beside him, he realized that trust was something that could be earned. something that had to be nurtured. For the next few days, the child focused on his lessons, on building his relationships with the other children, and on getting to know the planet. He spent time with the human who had found him, learning about the history of the humans and their struggles to build a peaceful society. He learned how they had worked together with other species to create a world where no one was left behind. It was a world of hope, a world of compassion, a world he had never known. As time passed, the child began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: confidence. Slowly, but surely, he started to trust the people around him, to trust that they would keep their promises. He began to understand that the humans weren't like the others who had abandoned him. They were different. They were here to help him, to guide him, and to give him a chance at a new life. One afternoon, the child stood outside, watching as a group of children played in the field. He had been invited to join them, but he was still hesitant. He wasn't sure if he could fully fit in. What if they didn't accept him? What if they saw him as an outsider, just like the others had? But then, the human who had brought him here appeared beside him, a warm smile on its face. "You know, you don't have to be afraid," the human said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They're just like you. They've been through their own struggles, their own fears. But here, we all look out for each other. You're one of us now." The child looked at the human, the words sinking in. He had always been so focused on his own fear, his own doubts, that he hadn't considered the possibility that he might be accepted, that he might belong. With a deep breath, the child turned to the group of children. He stepped forward, cautiously at first, and then with more confidence as the others greeted him with open arms. They laughed and smiled, welcoming him as one of their own. In that moment, the child realized something important. Trust wasn't just about believing that others wouldn't hurt you. It was also about allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to let others in, and to accept their help. It was about giving them the chance to show you that you mattered. And as the child laughed and played with the other children, for the first time in his life, he felt truly at home. The fear that had once gripped his heart began to fade, replaced by something stronger. It was the strength that came from knowing he was not alone, that he had a family now, a place where he was loved and valued. The journey ahead was still uncertain, and challenges would always come. But the child knew, deep in his heart, that he had found a new home, a home built on trust, kindness, and the promise that he would never be abandoned again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the child smiled, his heart full. He was no longer lost. He was no longer alone. He was finally, truly, home. "You said." He was wide open, and he was ready to face it. The child's life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Days spent learning about his new world, practicing skills that would help him fit in, and building bonds with the other children and humans alike. He had never known such a life. In the past, every day had been a struggle for survival, but now, each day brought something new: hope, laughter, and the possibility of a better future. However, despite the peace that surrounded him, the child couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Deep down, he knew he hadn't fully confronted his fears. Even with the trust he had slowly started to build with the humans, there was still a lingering doubt, a fear that it could all be taken away. He feared that at any moment, his new life could crumble, that the safety he felt could disappear in the blink of an eye. The human who had first found him noticed the change in him one morning. It was subtle, just a shift in his posture, a quiet withdrawal. It had been weeks since the child had shown any signs of doubt, and now, the human knew it was time for him to face the last hurdle. The child had to confront his deepest fears and prove to himself that he could stand tall, no matter the challenge. "Hey," the human said one afternoon as they sat together on a small bench overlooking the settlement. "I know something's on your mind. You've been quieter than usual. What's going on?" The child fidgeted, unsure how to put his feelings into words. I keep thinking that this could all end," he admitted, his voice small. "That maybe this is just a dream. What if one day you all decide to leave me too? What if this world isn't as safe as I think it is? The human listened carefully, its expression calm. It's normal to feel afraid. But what you need to understand is this. We've built something real here, something stronger than any fear. We chose to bring you here, to give you this new life. And we're not going anywhere. Not ever. But you need to trust yourself too. You need to believe that you are worth this, that you deserve all the love and care we've given you. The child looked up, searching the human's face for any hint of doubt, but there was none. What he saw was nothing but sincerity, a firm belief in him that made his heart beat a little faster. It was the reassurance he had needed, the confirmation that he wasn't just some temporary responsibility. He was a part of something real. But even with the human's words, the child's fear still clung to him. The challenge ahead wasn't just about trusting others. It was about trusting himself. It was time for him to prove that he was strong enough to overcome the fear that had been holding him back. As if on cue, a small group of children appeared nearby, waving excitedly. They had noticed the child sitting alone and had come to invite him to play. They were all smiling, their faces full of excitement and joy. The child hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether he was ready to face his fears head-on. But then something clicked within him. This was his moment. He stood up, brushing the doubts away, and walked toward the group of children. They cheered as he joined them, and he felt a warm surge of acceptance wash over him. For the first time, he didn't feel out of place. He wasn't the lonely alien child anymore. He was one of them. And that was a victory in itself. The game they played was simple, just a mix of tag and hide and seek. The child was a little slower than the others, but he didn't mind. He was laughing, genuinely laughing, and the joy in his heart filled him with a sense of belonging he had never known before. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the ground, he realized something important. He was no longer afraid. He had faced his deepest fear, the fear of being abandoned, and he had overcome it. He had allowed himself to trust, to open up, and to let others in. And in doing so, he had found a family, a community that accepted him. As the game ended and the children gathered around, they cheered for him, patting him on the back and congratulating him. The child beamed, his heart full. This was where he belonged. This was his home. That evening, as the child lay in bed, looking out the window at the stars, he felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He had been given a second chance at life, and he was determined to make the most of it. The stars, which had once seemed so distant and cold, now felt like old friends, their twinkle a reminder of the journey he had made. He had come so far, and yet there was still so much ahead. The universe was vast, full of mysteries and challenges, but now he was no longer alone. He had a family, a community, and a future, and that was enough. The child closed his eyes and smiled, finally at peace. The journey was far from over, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face whatever came next. The future was his, and he was no longer afraid. He had found his place in the universe. And for the first time in his life, he believed he truly belonged.